Hey guys, VaulSC here. Hope that you're having a good week. Today I'm going to take you through a tutorial which will teach you how to create terrain pieces for tabletop wargaming, specifically for Infinity the game, but for Tabletop Simulator. And we're going to do that using Blender, which is a free 3D modeling program which you can download whenever you want, very easy to get hold of. It's just a little bit difficult to use, and that's why we're going to be doing the tutorial. And remember, this is online, this is digital. We're not going to be talking about cutting out cardboard and plastic card. This is for Tabletop Simulator, the online simulation of Infinity that many people use nowadays. So we're going to be covering a few things in the tutorial. We're going to be showing you how to move objects from Tabletop Simulator into Blender and from Blender into Tabletop Simulator. That's not something I knew how to do when I first started, and I thought that would be the most daunting part of it. Actually very straightforward. Then I will give you a very basic overview of how to use the Blender interface and make some very simple shapes in Blender, and we're going to get to the point where we can make some really basic structures that would be useful for a game of Infinity, providing total cover, partial cover, allowing units to move through them, just so you can get started on your journey to possibly making terrain yourself, which is the whole idea. I will talk a bit about how to texture buildings as well, which is the more advanced and more important part of it, and that's usually the hurdle most people get stuck on. It is doable, but we'll get there, and I won't go into too much detail about some of these things. I'm sort of going to leave you guys with the tools and the equipment to do it. So hopefully, if you follow through this, you will be able to make some very basic terrain in Tabletop Simulator yourself, which is exciting, because realistically, more people in the community need to be able to do this. Now, for some background, I'll just turn off my camera and we'll just look at this. So, when we first started doing Tabletop Simulator and playing games of Infinity on it, we had some really basic things. Like this, for example, is just your old square, sort of classic cutout bit of terrain here, and we're all tired of seeing this and using these. They're very simple and dull. We also have this building here. I talked to the guy who made these and asked him if he could help me make them, or if he could make more of them, and he's just really too busy to do that. So although these buildings were very practical and worked out for many years, obviously would like to go beyond that. So that's why, you know, some more skilled people that can create tabletop scenery would be good. Similarly, this one here, made by Bishop Wraith, he's a member of the community. Again, very busy guy. As you can see, he has a little bit of skill with Tabletop Simulator and Blender, so he was able to construct this pretty easily. And that's the kind of stuff that we're going for. We also have things that were provided by Corvus Belli, who made this, you know, in 3D and provided it to us. But the thing about Tabletop Simulator is that when you've got one item of terrain, everyone can use it around the world. It's not like in real life we have to go and visit somebody and use their terrain or take your terrain to them, and it's just a singular individual object. In Tabletop Simulator, we're talking about a little bit of data. It's just a file which can be copied and shared. But the other thing about that is that people play Tabletop Simulator so much now, and there are so many people playing it. We've all seen the same terrain assets over and over again, which is why it would be good to have some new stuff. So just coming again to this table here, you can see some of the terrain that I've built, and the technique and the tutorial I'll be taking you through today will mostly be about making stuff that's similar to this and how to get the textures onto it. Over here you can see some stuff which is actually created a bit differently. This is from Micro Art Studio. This was done by Persian with the help of Zulu, and a lot of it is actually photo scanned, which is why you see these little rough edges around here and sort of the traces of the actual photograph that was used to produce these shapes and everything, which is a bit different from this over here, where it's basically, this is just made from, you know, computer 3D geometry with a texture applied around it. So there are more than one ways to do it. Obviously, when you go into your workshops and things, there are various different workshops where we pull other people's terrain assets, and that's how we've been continually coming up with more and more varied terrain. We also have this sort of stuff where Badlazer has gone into an actual computer game, XCOM, and downloaded the assets there and imported them into Tabletop Simulator, and that's very helpful. But ultimately, if we have a few more people in the community who have got the time and effort and the patience and the skill to be making stuff that's designed for Infinity the game, that'll be better because we'll have a wider variety of bits and pieces to use for our maps, and that way we'll be constantly playing on new and interesting maps with different assets we haven't seen before, and that's just generally a better thing for the events in the community that we have. Okay? So, pretty exciting stuff. You'll need to get yourself Blender, which looks like this. This is obviously just something where you'll go into Google and, type in Blender and download it for free and open it up, and you'll be presented with this, a very complicated interface. Obviously, for what we're doing today, you'll only use a few features of it. Don't be daunted and worried about all of this other stuff that's going on here, all this, the bits and pieces that are happening over here. We are not going to be making use of 99% of it. We're just going to be doing the real basics, okay? So the first thing I want to show you guys how to do is to go into Tabletop Simulator and to move an object into Blender so you can edit it there. And the first thing that we're going to have a crack at doing is taking the silhouettes that are used for our miniatures to show how big a space they take up and seeing what they look like in Blender. And one of the reasons why I'm going to show you how to import those is because that'll give us a sense of scale comparison. So when we're designing things like windows and doors and roofs and stuff, we can make it proportional to the actual silhouettes. So obviously, all of you guys know how to get here, the Infinity the Game room. If you don't, you need to download the workshop or subscribe to the workshop. So if we come over here to Templates and Silhouettes, open it up, right-click Search, and bring out these silhouettes over here. These are all objects, right? And they haven't really had any textures or anything applied to them. So you can download them all, but at least just get this one. Right-click on it and go to Custom, and you'll see that there's a model mesh there and a collider. Don't need to worry about the collider. Just click on this and go Control-A for copy, for all rather, and then Control-C for copy. And then just paste that into your browser window, right? So that's all you need to do. When you paste that in the browser window, it's going to download that particular shape. This thing here. You can do the same for these ones if you want. Just put them all in a handy folder where you're going to remember to keep them. That's going to be where you're going to be working on your project, and we're away. Before I jump into Blender, I also want to say that in Tabletop Simulator you can go to Objects, you can go to Components and go Blocks, and you can actually make some really basic shapes in TTS yourself. So the only reason why I would want to use Blender is to make objects that are at least a little more complicated than this. I mean, you can scale your object up. I can F8, left click after I've selected the gizmo, and I can actually make this thing a bit different and make a bit of a shape out of it. And I can, of course, color tint it and do various things with it like this, okay? But if I wanted to manipulate, say, just this side and make a little bit extending out of it, or if I wanted to hollow it out and make like an actual building that looks a bit more like this stuff here, then I'm going to need to do that externally in Blender, and that's what we're going to have a look at next. Okay, so going to Blender. I don't want to make this a Blender tutorial per se, because there's much better tutorials out there about how to use Blender than what you're going to see here, but I'm going to show you the real basics for getting around. All right. So I'm running Windows 10 and using obviously Windows here. So I've got a mouse with left click, right click, and a scroll wheel. So the scroll wheel is going to zoom me in and out, right? If I hold down the middle mouse button, it's just going to pan around this point here. And if I hold Shift and that same middle mouse button and just hold Shift, hold middle mouse, and then move my mouse around, that's how I'm just panning around, right? So that's generally how I'm going to get around. It's a combination of just mouse wheel by itself, holding down the mouse wheel button and then moving the mouse, holding down Shift and doing that, and moving around like this. If you look at your number pad, you can press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it's going to give you a variety of different views. And as you get a bit more advanced with Blender, you're going to be wanting to use those because they're more precise and they're very useful. So you've got this thing here called the default cube, and then up here you've got a light and a camera. You can see them at the top right panels here. We're not really going to need the light or the camera very much, so you can click on the little eye icon to hide them if you like. I'm going to bring the cube back. There it is there. And I'm going to hide the light. There we go. So we're just looking at this cube. What a lot of people do when they start is they just click on this and then hit the delete key to get rid of it and then make their own shape. I'm just going to press Control-Z to bring it back. Control-Z obviously being undo. Okay. So you can click anywhere on the field to deselect it, click on it to select it. If you hit the G for grab, that's going to allow you to grab it and move it. And if you want to move it somewhere in particular, you've got to left click to select where it's going to be going, and then Control Z to bring it back. You can also go G for grab, move it around, and then as you're moving, if you change your mind already, you can go right click, that'll move it back. So G for grab does all of that. The other thing you can do with your object is go G for grab and actually lock the movement of it to one of the axes. So if I go Z, it's now moving only up or down, proportionally like that. If I go X, it's going to lock it to one of these axes, and I'm moving it around. Y, moving it around, and then once I've found out where I'll remove it, left click to place it, Control Z to move it back, that kind of thing. Instead of going G for grab, I can go R for rotate, and again I can lock it to just rotating it around the Z or the X or the Y, that kind of thing. Right click, move it back. I can go S for scale, it's going to move it up, down, make it bigger or smaller, and again I could scale just on the Z, or just on the X, just on the Y, for example. Okay? Sorry for going through that really quickly, but again, we don't want to sort of focus too much on, you know, the functionality here. We just want to learn how to do the real basic things, okay? So what if, on my cube, I click it, and I go G for grab, Z for move it up, and I move it up here. Then if I go click it, S for scale, and I make it really big. And then if I go S for scale again with the Y, and I'm going to make this a bit smaller. Notice there's a little orange dot in the middle of the screen. As you can see, that's the center point, so scaling is going to happen around that. So if I make this if I move the mouse really close to that point, it's going to scale it really small. Click to stop that. And then if I go scale again with the Y, that's going to, hang on, let's go scale X. Let's make it like this. I'm making a wall here, so you can see there's a big old wall. Then I'm going to go G for grab, Y for moving that axis, move it over here. Okay, so that's how you might make a wall which you can import into Tabletop Simulator. But again, you know, you can do that with these shapes over here quite handily. So mainly I'm going to be teaching you how to manipulate the object itself and make some changes to it. Alright, so don't worry if you didn't follow everything there. We are going to redo a few things. I just want to get you guys to, you know, see the gist of why you'd be using Blender. Alright, so next, let's go up to File. And we're going to go down to Import, and we're going to go down to wavefront.object. And I'm going to go to my desktop, and what you want to do is just navigate to the folder where you downloaded and saved those silhouettes that I told you about a moment ago. So I'm going to click on the one that was Silhouette 2. And then I'm going to go import object. And as you can see here, it's brought in a silhouette 2. So this is how we're going to get an idea of how big our objects are compared to our Infinity the Games figurine, right? So this big wall here is obviously really a tall wall. So if I go scale, Z, make it really small like that, and I go G for grab, I can just grab it and move it over here-ish. Grab Z, like that. And this is where pressing the number 1 button on the keypad can be handy, because it actually shows you proportionally how tall that is, right? So now we've got a wall which will give this miniature some really good total cover. Clicking on it, G for grab, X for moving along the X-axis. I'm just going to get it out of the way. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go and I'm going to import wavefront and silhouette 7. And now I've got the tag. So this will also give cover to a tag as well, if you can see that. So clicking on the tag silhouette 7, G for grab, X for moving this over here. And because I want to do some work without these getting in the way, I can go up to my new mesh, which was created up here. And I can just click on these individually and hide them. And that's just going to get them out of the way. Cool. So coming back to this wall here that we've constructed isn't really going to be much better than just something we can make using the Tabletop Simulator stuff. So how do we manipulate this to make it a little bit more interesting? Well, at the top left, you're going to see this thing that says Object Mode. If you click on that, sorry, let's just make sure that this is selected. It's got the orange outline. Click on Object Mode, go down to Edit Mode. Alright, so that's going to allow you to edit the individual parts of the object, like these little vertice dots, or the edges, or the faces, the planes, the sides. The other way you can switch between these modes is using Tab. So try to get used to the hotkeys as much as you can, because you're going to be flipping between these modes a lot. Just to show you the difference here, with this wall, if I've got it selected and I go grab and then I move it somewhere, right click to push it, put it back, it's going to move the whole thing. If I go Tab, and then I select this side, and I grab it, it's only going to move that side. See that? So right click to bring it back. When you're in edit mode, there are these other three icons up here which are very important. One's for vertices, one's for edges, one's for faces. And you can also use the 1, 2, and 3 numbers on your keypad while you're in edit mode to move through them. So if I've got the vertices selected, like pressing 1 here and then click on this thing, it's just going to highlight just this one little vertice, and if I hit grab now, it's going to move just this little point. So right click to move that back. If I hit 2 and I click on just this line here, it's going to only move this this edge if I hit the G key. And remember, once you've got it selected, you can go G for grab, move it around, or you can go S for scale and you're scaling it around, or you can go R for rotate and it's rotating in a weird way. So remember, you have those tools at your disposal. What we're going to do is go 3 for the face and click on the side here. All right. So that allows us to scale it or rotate it or just grab it and move it somewhere. But while I've got the face selected, and I'm going to hold down Shift, use my little mouse wheel here just to pan this around the screen a bit more. While I've got this face selected, because I can just click anywhere on and off it to have it selected or not, I'm actually going to put my mouse somewhere in the middle of this face and go Control R. And what that does is it creates what's called a loop cut. So these yellow lines are suggesting where my loop cut's going to go. As I move away here, it's going to reappear. So let me just make sure it's appeared. If I hold down left click and then move, it's going to determine a different place for that loop cut to go. So if I put it here and then go left click, that's just going to cut all the way around my object. And now I've got these other faces. So if I select 3 for face, now I click on this, it's only going to affect this part of it by itself. You see that? So Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. That's just gone a few steps back just to undo all of that, right? I'm going to go 3 again, left click on this face so that I've got just this face selected. Then I'm going to go Control R, and you can see the loop cut there. And I haven't hit left click to commit this yet. I haven't actually selected that spot to make the cut. I'm now going to hit the number 5 button on my keypad. My numbers row above my keyboard, and it's going to split it into 5 evenly spaced loop cuts around the object. Now if I hit left click, it's actually cut them. So I'm going to go right click now. So it should have made some loop cuts all the way around. You have to sort of get used to when and where to left click, right click, and that sort of thing. So if I go Z, that's going to undo it. So I've got the face selected. Control R for the cut. 5 to make 5 cuts, left click to put them in place, and now I'm going to go right click just to deselect whatever I was doing there. So now holding down the mouse wheel, just moving around my object, you can see that they're cut up that way. So that's going to allow us just to sort of edit it in different points. If I hit the number 3 button on the keypad, click one of these, and if I go, in fact, let's choose this one on the side here. If I go Control R for the cut again, and I move my mouse near to the left-hand side, it cuts it in the opposite direction, like horizontally. So if I hit the number 3 button on the keypad, it's going to make 3 cuts. Left-click, it's committed them, so I'm going to right-click just to deselect all that, and click somewhere else here. Left-click over the gray area, and now I've made it this chopped up. Looks like a chocolate bar or something. So the interesting thing about this is if you wanted to make a wall that's slightly more interesting, as I go 3 for select face. Let's say I select, I don't know, this one. I hit G for grab, Z for Z axis, and move this down. It's actually going to move the surrounding faces with it like that. And I come over here. I can move that one. So for example, if I go Control Z, undo all of that. What if I select just this face and then I move over here, hold down Shift and select that one as well? It's got them both selected. So if I go G for grab, Z for move, I can actually create a slightly more interesting looking wall like that. See that? Now I click that. And that's something that I wouldn't be able to create in Tabletop Simulator by itself. I could click this and click that and go G for grab and Y for Y axis. And now I'm making the wall sort of a little bit bent around. You see that? And it's suddenly become a slightly more interesting wall. If I go over here and hit the 2 button for collecting sides, hold down Shift, just select those ones. I go G for grab, Y for Y axis. I'm now moving the wall around like that. And it's just starting to become a slightly more interesting wall. So just selecting these, G for grab, Y for Y axis, for example. Move those around here. Left click. So you can sort of see how, as a piece of infinity terrain, that might be a little bit more complicated than just something that looks like this. All right. So now that we know roughly how to edit it, let's just go tab again. That's going to put this back into object mode. So now if I hit G for grab, it's just going to move this around, right? So what I can now do is select the cube. Well, it's not a cube anymore, it's a wall. So I might want to sort of double click this, change this to wall, type in wall there. I've got a new name for it. If I go up to File and go down to Export and go down to Export as Wavefront, I can save it somewhere. So if I go into that folder I was working with and give it a new name, like Test Wall, and then under Geometry, open that up. So apply modifiers, yep, normals, UVs, right materials. This should be okay for now. So limit to selection only, because I only want to export this wall, not the other things that I've hidden or anything else like that. And then I think I'm ready to export. You might want to play around with these settings a bit. This is as far as what I know this should work. So if I go export object, that's actually exported it now to that folder. So it's created a file for it. So if I go into Tabletop Simulator, what I can do now is go up to Objects. Here we are, Components, Custom, and you go Custom Model like this. So click on Model, and then out here, left click, right click, and it's going to allow me to upload a mesh. So if I go Browse Local Files, go to my test wall, select that, open it, save it up to cloud, so test wall, just give it a unique name, upload that, and it's just going to import it and save it on Steam Cloud, and then I'm going to click Import. Non-convex is usually one that I want to select, especially when the building's hollow, so we'll come back to that later. If you're making a house or like a building structure with an interior, this needs to be selected. So you go Import, and here's our wall. How about that? So I'm coming around here. I'm going to go right-click. I'm going to color tint it so we can see it a bit better. And there we go. If I right-click it, go Custom. For material, typically choose cardboard because that's going to get rid of the shininess, which is kind of annoying. And then I go into the model, click that, Control-A, Control-C, and then Control-V down to Collider. And that's going to make sure that this is actually, you know, the right size, so it'll actually behave the way it looks. So if I move this around here, and then I'm going to click on L for lock. This is now a scenery piece. So if we drag out our miniatures now, let's just grab, I don't know, this Naga guy here. So we have successfully made a building in Blender that actually functions as a terrain piece. So that's the basics of it. That's realistically how you're going to do it. So you've now learned how to take something that you made in Blender very simply and easily, if you play around with a bit. And again, you may want to watch an actual Blender tutorial and spend an hour just getting used to the functionality of it, rather than going through my sort of hack and slash job. But this is something that will do the trick. Cool? So let's go back into Blender, and I will teach you a little bit more about what I know for making terrain. All right? So what I like to do is, rather than using the default cube, I make my buildings by starting with a plane. And we'll talk a bit more about how to use that in a moment and why. So if you go Add Mesh up here, I think you can even go Control-M or something like that. Control-M, or it might just be M on the keyboard. Might be Alt-M. No, I've got no idea about the hotkeys. Alright, so we're going to just click on Add and Mesh, and we're going to select Plane up here. It's going to make this plane in the center of our work area. So the size of my plane, let's just think about how big it wants to be. So I've got a Silhouette 2 and a Silhouette 7 over there. If this is going to be the footprint of a building we're going to make, it might need to be a bit bigger. So on the right over here, I've got my plane selected, so I've clicked on it. It's got the orange outline. And then over here you can see the size of it. So for scale, I'm going to click on each of these and I'm going to put a 4. So click on it, click 4, click 4, click away, and it's much bigger now. So this Silhouette 7, if I go grab X, move it over here for scale, a tag could go inside this. Or more importantly, grab X, move this over here. This is going to be kind of appropriate for a Silhouette 2 as well. So a decent sized building, maybe a bit smaller. It's up to your own personal taste. So we'll hide these again. Alright, so clicking on this thing, hitting Tab for edit mode, so I can actually edit this, this piece. What I like to do is I like to give my building footprint a bit of thickness. So rather than being just a flat sheet of paper, I'm going to make it as though it's a bit of cardboard, and it gives it a little bit more of a platform, and we'll explain why that is a little bit later. But up here, I'm going to hit 3 to select the face. So I'm selecting faces, so this is definitely selected. Then what I'm going to do is hit the E button. E stands for extrude, and then I'm going to go Z to make sure it's extruding upwards. Actually, no, it's Z by default, so we'll go back to Z. So it's extruding upwards like this, and I'm just going to choose a point to click on. I'm going to go click. And then down here you saw that there was a bit of a menu that came up, so I'm just going to click on this. And it's showing that it's brought it up by 0.87286 meters. So I'm just going to change that to 0.02 because I want it to be really low. So I'm going to go enter. And now what it's done is if we zoom in really closely, it's made a very small lift there. Okay? So relative to our meshes over here, it's got a very low platform, and one of the disadvantages of this is that you're going to have Infinity players who are going to be arguing about whether they get cover from this, but look, that's their problem. We'll come back to why that this is important. We'll do that a little bit later, okay? So coming back over here, I'm in edit mode. I'm going to click on just the top face here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control R to make that loop cut. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to hold down left click and move my cut all the way to the edge, and I'm going to sort of stamp out where there's going to be a wall. So there's going to be a thin wall to the side here, so I'm going to let go of that, then left click, and then again if I open this up I can actually put in exactly how wide I want that wall to be. So if I put 0.95 and then hit enter, that's just going to make sure it's choosing a particular width. In fact, I'm not happy with that. I'm going to go Control Z to get rid of that. I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to Control R, move this all the way to the edge, and then go bang. And this time I'm going to make it 0.98. And what I think that's doing is factoring it like 0.98 meters or whatever it is away from the center or the other edge or something like that. But the important thing is that as I'm making the buildings for my map and my buildings collection, I kind of want the edges of walls and stuff to be kind of a uniform distance, rather than being haphazardly a different amount all the time. So in edit mode, I'm going to hit 3 for selecting faces. Click on this now. You'll notice that it's no longer selecting the side because it's a separate face. I'm going to go back up here, Control R to make the other loop cut, and I'm going to hold down left click to move this all the way around here, let go of it, and then left click again to position it. And this time it's negative, so I'm going to go negative 0.98, enter, and then click over here, and it's made another little wall area. So going back to this, I'm selecting 3 for face, left click on this, Control R, up here, holding down left click and dragging this to the side, placing it, left click, and then I've got, oh, I got it to 0.98 almost exactly. There we go. Click away. 3 for face, left click here, Control R, and then once the yellow line appears as I move the mouse button up here, holding the left click and moving, then letting go of the hold, then left click, that positions it, coming down here, just manually inputting 0.98, which is what I want, and then enter. Cool, so what we've got now is we've got all these cuts which have appeared around this, and that's going to allow me to determine where the walls of my little building are going to be. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is, similar to what we did with our wall before, 3 for faces, left click on this thing, Control R for loop cut, and then I'm going to split this into, I don't know, 5 cuts. I think that should be okay. Then left click, and that's going to position them. Then I move around here. 3 for face, click on one of the faces, Control R, and then I'll do 5 again, and we've got a grid, and then I'm going to left click. Cool. All right. So coming back to our little silhouette here, if I click on this guy, in fact, what I'm going to have to do to be able to click on him is to go tab back to object mode, because otherwise I can't actually do anything other than edit this plane over here. So now on this guy, if I go G, Z, G, X rather, I can bring him around here, and if we go back to the plane and click on the plane and go tab, we can sort of see that this has a sort of building opening which will allow a silhouette 2 to get through a door, but a very narrow one. So we're just going to bear that in mind. So tab, object mode, click on this guy. I'm going to go up and actually hide him. Then we're going to go back to this plane and go tab for this. Okay? So, next up, I'm going to go 3 for planes. And I'm going to actually raise some of these little outside bits here, except for the place that's going to be our door. So to do this, I'm holding down shift and I'm just left clicking all of the parts of this wall that I'm going to want to raise. I can also, I believe, go control and then click somewhere else here, and I'll actually select all the faces in between the other end here and the next bit. So that might be a good, quicker way to do it. Control, click on this bit here, and then control, click on this bit here. So at this point, I've actually selected everything except for these 2 bits, and that's because the selection I've created here is going to be the walls I'm going to raise, and I'm going to be leaving that empty, so it's going to be a door. In fact, what we're going to do is I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to go hold shift, left click to actually open those up. So we're going to have a room with doors on that point and this point. So now that I've got the correct areas to raise for our wall, I'm going to hit E, and then I'm going to move my mouse up like this. And as you can see, it's making walls of a building. And that's why we were doing all of this. Only problem is that the point where I'll actually have the walls ending is just going to be based on where I end up clicking. And to make that a bit more uniform, I'm just going to go right click to cancel that. And up the top here, there's a little snapping tool, a little horseshoe icon, looks like a magnet. So if I click that, then I come back over here and I hit E, and move the mouse up, it's just going to move it in increments that snap to a particular point. So what I'll do is I'll let it snap once like that, I'll hit left click. So now we've committed the wall to just move up to that point there, right? So let's have a look at how we're going with that. If I bring back our little 2D mesh there, what you can see now is that you've got a, I've got T for tab, object mode, click the object, G for grab. And if I just move this guy around here, by the way, we've still got the snapping tool on, so I'll just get rid of that for a sec. So G and then Y. You can sort of see that this is, this wall allows you to sort of walk over the edges of it, so you can vault over it like you would in normal terrain, and you can also see over it, but you can go prone behind these walls. So what we can think about now is actually leaving some of the walls at this level to be windows. So if I click back on this again, and then I go tab, that'll actually flip over to edit mode. I'm going to select the snapping tool again, and this time I'm just going to go back around and I'm going to select the tops of the walls, holding down shift. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So shift is just going to select individually the parts of the walls we want. If we want to do this faster, we can use the control key to do that. And that's going to select that, shift there, control on that, and then control. So if I hit E for extrude and move them up, it's going to continue moving them up. But what if I wanted to make a little window somewhere? So let's pretend that I wanted to have a window in these 2 spots. And I don't know, these 2 spots here, there, and there. So let's just pretend that that's where we want our windows. You can make them a little bit narrower, obviously, by only selecting this part, so that's fine, but just for our demonstration, we're going to leave those there. Then I'm going to hit E for extrude, now that we've got everything selected, and move it up, and it's going to snap it up once, and then I'm going to move it up one more time, and it's going to snap it up there, and then I'm going to go left click, and now we've got a building which has got walls which are definitely tall enough for this guy to fit inside of. And if you are so inclined, you could also have tags go inside of your building. I quite like that on my terrain. So I'm just going to go tab to get object mode, left click on this guy, G for grab, Y for, so X, sorry, for moving him around. As you can see, he actually is going to fit through the door as well. See that? So the tag is going to be able to get in the building no problem, and it's even going to be able to use this as cover, and the tag is even going to be able to get total cover from this wall. So if you like that kind of thing, you can do it that way, or you can make the top of the buildings like a little bit lower so that it's easier for guys to climb up on top of them, or use super jump to get on top of them, for example. So that might be one way to go. Alright, so we're just going to hide that. So, what if we wanted to close the tops of this off, though? That is a different story. What I really should have done in this example is I should have made... in fact, if I hit the Z key enough times, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get back to where we were before. Alright. So I've just hit Control Z so many times we've got back to this point. If I hit E again, and then move up. I'm going to left click now to commit that extrusion. Then I'm going to hit E again to move it up. And the difference, now that I hit left click, the difference is I've actually created cuts at a second point here, which is quite important. I'm going to make some windows here, and by the way, people who are Blender experts are going to cringe at how this technique goes, because there's probably a much better way of doing it. But we're in edit mode, so we can see the lines. I'm going to do 3 for selecting faces. I'm going to select this face, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go delete, and I'm going to go down to faces, because I'm going to select delete that face. Then I'm going to find the one on this side, and I'm going to select that, and I'm going to go delete face. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit 2 on the keyboard, select edges, select that one there. Then I'm going to move over using Shift and mouse wheel, holding middle mouse button, and click that. So these 2 faces are sort of on opposite side, these 2 edges rather. Now if I hit the F key on my keyboard like this, it's going to put a new face between them. Then what I can do is I can select this edge and the edge opposite it for the window, F for face. I can move around using a combination of Shift and mouse wheel button held down and zooming in with the mouse wheel. Click this, click that, F for face. Then I'm going to come underneath here. Very slow process, I know, so click this, click that, holding down Shift, F for face, and it's just going to fill everything in. Cool. So now we have a window, and we can basically do the same thing with this this window over here if we want to. But that's generally how I'm going to do it, right? So I now want to come back to you and explain a little bit about why I actually moved this up and I actually had like a bit of thickness there. Part of it has to do with normals. So if I go to this button up here, which is next to this little circle sort of eclipse icon kind of thing, if I click this this arrow, if I come down to this thing which says face orientation, it's going to make everything blue. So what normals are, and you'll hear about normals a bit in 3D modeling, normals are where the face that you're selected, if I hit 3 and then left click, this face that I've got selected, blue means that it's facing the way that it normally would if you're trying to look at it, right? Let me just show you something real quick. If I come around here and I go back to object mode, then I click on this guy and I go tab again to make it edit. This is what a silhouette in Tabletop Simulator actually is. It's not actually perfectly spherical, it's actually lots of straight lines joined together. So that is actually what the object we are using for our silhouettes in the game actually are. So if I hit 3 for selecting faces and select this guy here and then go delete and then click face, you can see inside of it. And you can see that the other sides of the faces in there are actually red. So click this, delete face, click this, delete face, click this, delete face. You can see that the outsides of the cylinder are blue, but the insides of it are red. And if I was to import this mangled, cut-up version of the silhouette into Tabletop Simulator, if you were to look inside of it, you wouldn't actually see those red faces at all. You would see directly through it. That'd be transparent. And that's because only the blue side actually is visible and shows to your camera, right? So one reason I give this a bit of thickness is that if you flip this building over, it would actually be completely transparent. You'd see through it. I know that some of you guys, when you're in Tabletop Simulator and you're using some of the terrain pieces that we've imported from other places, sometimes they actually, you know, have a sort of see-through thing through it, like this guy here. Like if you flip that around, the reason why you're not seeing an underneath part of this this asset is because there are no normal sort of faces that are set underneath it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with this terrain piece. In fact, I love this wall. I think it's an amazing little bit. But there may be some situations where you're doing a very creative piece of terrain and you want you know, to be able to flip it around and sort of upend it and do various different things with it. And that's why if you've got a terrain piece like this and you flip it over, it's actually got a section here which has got a texture attached to it. So me personally, that's why I like to give this a little bit of thickness underneath there and make it an actual you know, 3-dimensional shape. The other reason is that we may want to actually have this moved up and act as a roof, like a second story. So one reason why I don't build the roof in Blender is because I want to be able to put a secondary bit on top of it so that we can actually use different states. So this thing over here, we can actually create 2 different states to it. So in Blender, I'll make this version of it then I'll make the top version of it, and I'll stick them together within Tabletop Simulator. I won't do that within Blender. I'll combine them in Tabletop Simulator, and we'll talk about how to do that a little bit later. Okay, so just an important thing to bear in mind. Right, so that guy is there. Move him somewhere else. I've still chosen the snapping tool for some reason, so move that right there. Now, coming back to normals, if I select this building and I go to edit mode by pressing tab, sometimes when you're fiddling around with a complicated structure and you're creating faces to join other parts of the building to bridge things up, sometimes you'll see a face that actually looks red. Let me just see if I can show you what that's like. So if I go, I don't know, is it Control N? Is it Alt N? So if you're working on your project and you see that little red face like that, that's a problem, because it means that people are going to see directly into it as if it was deleted. What you need to be able to do is click on it, select it, go Alt N, and then go to Flip and Flip Face, and that's just going to show you that. So let's come back over here. You can also get this this settings here to actually show you the where the actual edges and faces are, but we're not going to worry about that too much. I'm just going to take away face orientation, and we're going to come back to what the building looked like. By the way, in Blender, if we just go back to object mode, there are a few other different views up here. Like you can just see the wireframe view if you're trying to sort of see where the lines are in relation to each other and get like an X-ray vision view of it. We've been working in this mode here. You can also go to the mode which is going to show you textures and stuff. This one here is sort of like a pre-render. I've got no light on at the moment, so if I bring my light back by clicking this this icon here, it's going to show you how the lighting affects with your 3D model, right? Okay, so let's just get rid of that. Right, so what you can do now, of course, is you can take your shape and you can select it, and then you can go up to File, Export, Wavefront, and you can actually send that shape into the folder you've been working with, and you can go back into TTS, and again you go up to Objects, Components, Customs, Model, and you can actually bring in a whole new building. And what you can do there is you can export, so you can import this building which we just created, once you're finished with it, of course, and start working on it in Tabletop Simulator and use it as a piece for your games, right? But I'm sure you guys want to know a little bit more about how to texture a building, and that's what we're going to focus on next. And texturing is the harder part of it. My ability with UV mapping and texturing is very, very basic. So take what you can from it as a learning, stepping stone point. But obviously, if you want to get into it a lot more deeper, you're going to have to watch other people's tutorials and get lessons and that sort of thing. I spent a lot of time last year getting lessons on how to use Blender, and one reason why I can now make this tutorial for you is I can sort of leave out all of the stuff that was unnecessary that I shouldn't have bothered learning, that was just sort of trial and error. Alright, so we are in object mode right now. On the left hand side, if we come down to this little red circular icon here and click on that, and then we click on new, we are going to create a material for our building. And a material is how you're going to apply a texture to it. There are a bunch of different things you can do here, giving it colors and stuff, but what we're actually going to do is go down to this yellow button, yellow circle next to base color, click on it, then we're going to come over here, and under texture, we're going to select image texture. Okay? That's going to give us some new options. I'm then going to click on new, and actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little portrait icon of an image. So I'm going to bring in an image that's already around, and I'm going to click this and see if I can find it. Oh, and I'm going to go open, sorry, wrong button. So the one that says open, we'll try that. Then I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to select an image which I already have ready to go, and there it is there, and I'm going to open it. So now, my building will have a texture on it, which I can't see because the view mode that's selected up here is this solid white viewport shading kind of thing. I'm going to click on the one to the right of that, and now it's showing me the texture as it's applied to my building, right? If I click on the next one over, it's going to show the the render mode. So if I bring the light back, it's going to show how the light is sort of looking at the textures there. So I'm going to shut that off again, go back to this mode. And you can see what it's done is it's taken the image that I've just dragged off my desktop, and it's just applied it to the building kind of randomly. And what we're going to learn how to do is to map the parts of this texture to various different parts. So rather than spreading the pixels across the wall like that, it's going to actually put them in a way that looks, you know, like this, with, you know, this texture only on that wall and this texture only on that wall. And this is something called UV mapping, because it's all about telling the computer where to put the pixels of the image relative to your actual object that you're trying to create. So, by the way, guys, this is a texture that I have created for the purpose of doing this. And the way I've chosen to do it is to make a palette of different textures across one big sort of square-looking image. And we're going to see why I've done that in a moment. But I'm sure you can come up with a more advanced way of doing it in the long term. In the short term, if you want to practice just by using my image, here's how you can do that. So, Tabletop Simulator. In fact, what you might want to do is you might want to get my VaulSC Custom Infinity Terrain Assets workshop, and when you go to it and you subscribe to this, you can look at these buildings here and decide, well, do I want to practice with one of these textures that VaulSC has made? Let's pretend that it's going to be, I don't know, this one over here. So if I right-click this one and go Custom, and then I take this diffuse image, click on it, Control A. If I now copy that into the browser, it's going to download this image. And what you can then do is save that image to your desktop or whatever you want to do. Then when you're in Blender over here and you've selected your object, you go over to Material, gave it a material, created a new material. You can open this texture like we showed you how to do, and now it's going to be applied to your image. All right? So what you want to do next is open up a viewport that's going to allow you to see UV mapping. One way to do that is to move your mouse button way up here over to the right. So where it says Options, just above that, there's a little sort of gap in between this viewport and the scene collection area. So right exactly here, left click, drag. Come on, left click, drag. I always have trouble doing this. Give me a second, guys. Just going to try and remember where to bring this little dude. Oh, here we go. Yeah, you just got to find the exact spot to do it. I think you can also do it under UV editing up there, but just got to find a little point where it sort of gives you that window, right? There we go. All right, so now that you've got two versions of this window which you've opened out, this button up here to open up this little menu, and you're going to come down to UV Editor, click on that, and it's got this sort of grid which is going to show you the layout of the image you're going to be working with. So I'm going to click over here, and what I want to do is go Tab into Edit Mode. So now that I'm in Edit Mode, it's actually going to give me the texture, so scroll wheel to zoom out, and you can see what my image now looks like. I've got an image which I've created in Photoshop, and what I've done is I've gone onto the internet and I've actually downloaded textures that look like different types of material. So like a sci-fi looking bulkhead grid type thing. I've got some stuff that looks like cement or whatever this is. I've got some plaster, some stone up here, and then like some hexagonal sort of grid sort of stuff here. And I've created this for my Infinity Terrain. I do want to tell you guys that if you want to use my image, you can. It's going to mean that your terrain will look like my terrain. It's going to look like you've just made a variation of what I've done. If you want to create your own image, that's much better. If you want to take my image and then put it into Photoshop and copy some other textures over top of my textures, that's a really cool way of doing it. The ultimate way of doing it would be to create your own images from scratch and lay them out in ways that are going to be best for your UV. That's going to be more advanced and long term. But if you're just practicing, feel free to use this. In the long run, I'd strongly recommend playing around with this and bringing in your own textures. The idea, though, is that when we're mapping and we're choosing the walls and things, all I'm going to have to do is just drag the walls over to the parts of the object, parts of the image, and we're going to show you how to do that. So coming over here, left click, I've got faces selected, and I'm going to hit A for all, and now it's suddenly put a grid over here where I can actually move the parts of my object. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go down to UV Unwrap Faces, and I'm going to select Unwrap, and that's actually put everything there. Another way you can do it is right click, UV Unwrap Faces, and go down to Smart UV Project, click on that, and that's going to, lay everything out, so to speak. So let's look at how we're going to do this. Over here in our little viewport, I can select any number of these different faces. So I'm holding down Shift and I'm just selecting the parts of the walls here that all want to have the same texture, because they are all the one part of the wall here. So if I grab them all, and by the way, I can use Control to select these more quickly. So what I've done is I've used the object edit mode to select just the areas of this wall. And what it's done here is it's actually shown me where they are on the UV map editor. So what I can now do is I can go 3 for faces, click that, hit A, that's going to select them all, and I can move them all. Sorry, hit A, G for grab, now I move them. And I can hit S for scale, and again I can scale them down. Left click to present that, then right click, sorry, G for grab again, move this over here. And you guys can see what you're doing, can't you? I'm moving this and I'm scaling it so that the various portions of my wall fit to just one texture. So clicking over here, tab to go object mode, and you can sort of see what I've done, can't you? I have mapped it so that all of the faces here have been selected and all of them have been dragged over top of that plaster, meaning that the entire wall now looks kind of cool. It's all plastered, whereas over here it just looks like a haphazard mess of different textures, which makes no sense. And that is the essence of UV mapping. We basically take the areas that are meant to be one solid sort of texture, and we've controlled that so that it actually, you know, looks like this. If I go back to edit mode and I select all of these again, so let's just grab them all. Come around here, grab these. By the way, there's some really small ones at the bottom of this, which I probably shouldn't forget to grab too. So I'm just going to grab these. Then if I come over here and I grab it in this window, if I move them over to, I don't know, this spot here, I can hit S for scale, bring them right down. Whoops. S for scale, scale them right down. G for grab, S for scale, bring it back up. Left click. I've now made the wall black polka dots because it's looking like this over here, right? So if I go Control Z, bring it back, move it over here, it's now going to be concrete. You will notice that the better you get the Tetris block here to fit with the texture, the more pixels it's going to be using. Whereas if I go S for scale and make it really big, it's just going to become more and more pixelated and not really very good with the resolution. So what you're wanting to do, and this is why I've made these big old sort of spaces in my palette, is you're wanting to basically fill up as much space in that area that you can. Note that when I come over here and if I grab these ones and I want to put that onto the same texture, and I come over here, if I grab all of these and put them over the same space that the last lot of wall used, that's fine. I can actually reuse that as well. So what you're actually doing is you're using all of the panels here and you're clustering them all over top of each other. And that's how, when I make my terrain here, when you look at the UV maps for these buildings, I've actually stuffed all of the little bits and pieces from the edges and stuff onto this one black area. And then I've taken the outside walls and I've put all of the panels or the faces for that and stuffed them all over top of that one particular section. So you can see why I'm using a palette for this job. Other people do it differently, like people who are a bit better at Blender than me, like the guys that made the classic Infinity terrain, you know, had a bit more of a precise way of doing it. So they're a bit more advanced than me. But yeah, we can sort of see now, if I bring the light back, that you can sort of work on it and sort of see how the light's going to affect your textures. But all in all, what you need to do to get going with this is simply to know that in edit mode, you can actually do the UV editing like this. You can go to object mode and find the texture to use. You probably want to make your own texture. And as long as you've got enough time and effort, you can actually map everything using these techniques pretty straightforwardly. So hopefully this has given you a basic gist on how to do it. One thing that you might run into in terms of problems later on is when you try to do UV mapping for a more complicated shape. So again, I've selected one face, A for all. If I right click, unwrap, and I unwrap something which has got a lot of different faces, they may be all sort of bundled and sort sort of spread out in ways that are quite hard to select. One thing you may need to learn how to do eventually is to select the edges of your object that cut off the various different walls, and then once you've selected some of them, you go right click and then you go mark seam, and that creates a little red line there. What that's doing is it's going to tell the computer that when you unwrap everything and basically create the UV map for all of these things, the computer's going to look at that and go, right, what I'm being told here is that this wall here is separate from these faces over here, which are a different part of the object. So if you were to go to the edges here, which are the significant edges that sort of separate the parts of the image you're going to use, and you give them all a marked seam, when you come to the task of, again, pressing 3, left click, A for all, right click, UV unwrap, when it comes to unwrapping everything, it's going to do a better job than what we're seeing over here on the side, because you don't really want to be working with this. You want to be working with, you know, that grid of individual faces. Having said that, what I tend to do is I typically only just grab these things anyway and move them around one by one, and that's usually what works. So I would encourage you to you know, do a bit of trial and error here. Do a bit of playing around. Try and get used to using Photoshop or whatever editor you do to replace the various different types of textures with textures of your own. The way that I've done it, as you can see, is I've created a texture which has a palette of a few different materials, something very dark, something very metallic, something very organic, something very, you know, man-made like concrete, something very sci-fi, and that's how I've, you know, used that palette for everything there. When you create your texture, it's okay to make something that's big, like a 4K texture. I was warned initially not to do that, but because all of the objects here are actually loading up the same texture, then what happens is that when you open my map, the map is going to download that texture just one time, and then it's going to apply it to all of these buildings, and each building has been imported into TTS with the UV map, so that the texture knows what parts of it are meant to spread to what different areas of the object. So when you load up the map, it's actually very quick, and you still get textures which have quite a lot of high resolution stuff there. Cool, I think I might leave it at that for the tutorial for now. I know that I went through some parts quite quick. I know that I left a lot of sort of, you know, room for people to ask questions and not really sort of know fully what to do. If you want to do this long term and make a lot of terrain after you've understood the basics that I've shown you, I would strongly recommend that you actually I'd actually recommend that you watch a lot of other Blender tutorials and learn a bit more about the hotkeys and the interface and about UV mapping and about texturing in general, and watch a little bit of Photoshop tutorial as well, because what I've shown you is kind of like the hard way of doing it, the really basic way that just sort of bluntly works. And because I'm not a super perfectionist, that's generally the way I've got to it. But we may get you to a point where you know successfully how to make some decent looking terrain buildings and get them into TTS so we can use them in our workshops and maps and tournaments in our community events. So that would be really, really cool. I do encourage you to spend a bit of time on it first. Get to a point where your buildings are practical and polished and have, you know, decent colliders and fit together with your other buildings and are compatible with stuff that we make. And then once you get it up to scratch to a certain point, that's when everybody can start making use of them, and you can make your own workshop like I did and show them off and get credit for them. So all the best, guys. Good luck. I'll be in Discord. Ask me a question if you want to, and hopefully we'll see a bit more creativity out of the community. So hopefully you enjoyed it. See you next time.